She was the face of an era, gliding across runways with a presence that felt untouchable. Shalom Harlow wasn't just a supermodel. She was a moment in fashion history. But then, she vanished. No announcement. No scandal. Just silence. For 10 years, the world asked, where did she go? And more hauntingly, why did she leave? But what no one saw was the storm behind the scenes, a silent collapse of health, identity, and strength. While the cameras stopped flashing, she was fighting a battle most wouldn't survive. Lyme disease, mold poisoning, complex PTSD. Pain so deep it rewired her entire nervous system. This isn't a comeback story. It's a story of survival. Of what happens when the spotlight fades and you're left alone with your truth. When she finally returned, it wasn't louder, it was deeper. She didn't come back to reclaim a title. She came back to reclaim herself. She didn't arrive in the fashion world. She entered it like a force.
Would a model by any other name still be as sweet? Shalom's peaceful center is grounded in her very name.
From the moment Shalom Harlow stepped onto the runway, there was something undeniably different about her. It wasn't just her beauty, it was her movement. A kind of fluid grace that made everything around her feel slower, softer, almost sacred. In an industry obsessed with the bold and exaggerated, Shalom moved with quiet confidence. She didn't demand attention. She held it. In the 90s, her face was everywhere. High fashion campaigns, Vogue covers, closing shows for the world's biggest designers. But it was her collaboration with Alexander McQueen that cemented her legacy. And then, there was that show. Spring/summer 1999. Shalom walked onto a white platform in a strapless dress, rotating slowly as two robotic arms sprayed her with black and neon yellow paint. The crowd sat breathless, not because of spectacle, but because of the feeling. The vulnerability. The raw, unfiltered emotion. People cried, not because it was shocking, but because it was real. McQueen himself later said it was the only show he ever cried during. Not because of the concept, but because of what Shalom brought to it. In that moment, it wasn't about fashion. It was about art, about surrender, about trusting your body to speak when words can't.
I always pictured my name in bright light.
She wasn't just a model. She was a moment in motion. A star the industry couldn't ignore. And then, she was gone. One season, she was closing the most anticipated shows. The next, nothing. No headlines. No announcements. Just silence. For an industry addicted to visibility, Shalom Harlow's sudden disappearance was more than noticeable, it was unsettling. Campaigns rolled on without her. New faces came and went. But for those who watched her rise, one question echoed louder than the runways themselves. What happened to Shalom? There were whispers, of course. Industry murmurs of burnout, or illness, or simply stepping away. But there was no statement, no press release, no dramatic farewell. Just the eerie stillness of someone slipping out of the spotlight, not with noise, but with quiet grace. And that silence only deepened the mystery. She had been everywhere. Then she was nowhere. For nearly a decade, fans, editors, designers, all wondered, all speculated. But the truth was far more human than any headline could grasp. Behind the scenes, while the fashion world spun forward, Shalom was facing something far more serious and far more invisible. Her absence wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a quiet unraveling. The kind that happens when the body can no longer keep up with what the world demands, and the spirit finally says, enough. For nearly a decade, the world only saw the absence. What they didn't see was the battle Shalom Harlow was fighting, not on a runway, but in a dark, quiet room. What finally emerged, years later, was a revelation few could have imagined.
Not just speaking from an individual point of view, although this did happen personally to me, but I also have seen it within the industry as well, that kind of level of vulnerability and innocence combined with power, wealth, and prestige is a particularly dangerous combination.
She had been suffering from late-stage Lyme disease and severe black mold poisoning. The kind of diagnosis that doesn't come quickly or clearly. It stole her energy, her strength, and, for a while, her sense of self. She was bedridden, her nervous system overwhelmed. The body that once moved with such grace on runways now couldn't carry her to the bathroom. The woman who had commanded cameras could barely face daylight. But it wasn't just physical. Shalom would later share that the illness threw her into a spiral of complex PTSD, not just from the disease itself, but from everything that came before: the pressure, the pace, the early fame, the adult world she was thrust into far too young. She said, "One of the aspects of my surviving late-stage Lyme was that I was thrown into complex PTSD in a very extreme way. It wasn't just about healing her body. It was about unraveling years of internalized pressure, silence, and survival. And when you look at the glossy photos, the magazine covers, the flawless fashion films, they feel like another world entirely. A world Shalom once ruled, and a world she now watched from the shadows. The contrast is striking. Bright lights and couture versus a dimly lit room where she learned how to breathe again. Alone, unseen, unknown. But even in that quiet, something within her was rebuilding. Shalom didn't chase a comeback. She chose something far braver: recovery. She quietly stepped away from the flashing lights and moved to the coast of California. No headlines, no press, just silence. There, in the stillness of nature and time, she began to heal. Not just her physical body, wrecked by late-stage Lyme and toxic mold, but something deeper. Her nervous system had been pushed to the edge. Her soul, bruised by years of pressure and perfection, needed rest. She turned to somatic therapy, yoga, and the kind of emotional work most never speak of. Slowly, she began to reconnect with her own body, not as a model, but as a person. She realized that her trauma wasn't just from illness. It went further back, to when she was just a girl in an adult world, praised for her poise, but never protected from its weight. Her elegance had once been survival. Now it was surrender. In the privacy of recovery, Shalom wasn't trying to reclaim lost fame. She was trying to reclaim herself. Each day, each breath became part of a quiet rebuilding. No audience, no applause, just one woman learning to be whole again. After nearly a decade in the dark, Shalom returned, not with a press tour, not with drama, but with grace. It was 2019, and the world was watching the Versus Runway, unaware that history was about to repeat itself. At 45, Shalom Harlow stepped onto the catwalk as if she had never left. There were no flashing headlines announcing her return. No grand campaign. Just her, poised, radiant, and effortless. And for a brief moment, time folded in on itself. Her walk hadn't changed. It still carried that rare mix of softness and command. It wasn't nostalgia, it was presence. Then came the viral video. In a shimmering metallic bodysuit, Shalom danced. Not performed, danced. Freely, joyfully, fully alive. Her smile wasn't rehearsed. It came from somewhere deeper. "I am well again," she later said. And in that smile, you could see it. The years of pain, of rebuilding, of choosing to return on her own terms. This wasn't about reclaiming lost fame. It was about reintroducing herself, not to the world, but to herself. Shalom didn't come back to prove anything. She came back because she could. Because healing had made space for beauty again. And the fashion world, for a moment, stood still. Shalom's return wasn't a sprint back to the spotlight, it was a slow, mindful walk. One foot at a time. This time, she wasn't chasing trends or pleasing gatekeepers. She chose each step carefully, each campaign, each cover. Only what felt aligned. Only what felt right. Her comeback wasn't just visible, it was intentional. One of the first glimpses of this new era came with her Vogue Hong Kong cover in 2023, reunited with longtime friend Amber Valletta. The photo wasn't just about fashion, it was about friendship, about legacy, about two women who had seen it all and came through the other side. Their energy wasn't performative. It was grounded. strong, lived in. You could feel the weight of time, not as a burden, but as a badge of honor. Then came the St. Laurent campaign with Kate Moss. Two icons, not frozen in the past, but evolving, boldly, stylishly, unapologetically. Shalom didn't try to fit herself into the mold of who she used to be. She shaped something new. In a world obsessed with youth, she stood still and let the world come to her. Her message was subtle but powerful. Real style doesn't age, it evolves. She had nothing to prove and everything to express. Her presence now was more than aesthetic, it was a statement. That beauty can grow deeper with time. That authenticity is magnetic. And that after all the lights fade, what remains is grace. Shalom Harlow was never the loudest voice in the room, but she was always the one you remembered. As the world of fashion grew noisier, faster, more demanding, Shalom moved in the opposite direction. She became a quiet advocate for something deeper, for sustainability, for mindfulness, for working with intention instead of ego. Alongside her close friend Amber Valletta, she began aligning herself with conversations about conscious fashion, creative integrity, and lasting impact. She wasn't chasing the next cover. She was choosing projects that meant something. With every appearance, she reminded us that real influence isn't about how many headlines you make. It's about how deeply you affect the space you're in. Her shift wasn't just from fame to purpose, it was from proving to being. From spectacle to substance. Even now, she remains a symbol of quiet strength, of elegance that isn't polished, but lived in. And perhaps, above all, Shalom's legacy is this. In a world obsessed with speed, she taught us the power of moving slow. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and share. Subscribe for more untold journeys of resilience and grace. There's always more behind the spotlight.